Hi, I'm Steve Clemons, and I have a question. 30 years after the Palestinians and Israelis signed their historic peace plan in Oslo, why is peace more elusive than ever? Let's get to the bottom line. On paper, it sounded like a good idea. Get Palestinian and Israeli leaders in a room, far away from their people and the media, and have them talk about what they could accept at bare minimum. That was the premise of the Norwegian officials who brokered the Oslo Accords in 1993. It was supposed to be a temporary deal, but it was celebrated as a full-blown peace treaty. Today, Palestinians have a measure of autonomy, but they're far from free. Israel has prospered and gained more acceptance in the region, but it's still running one of the world's longest military occupations. So was Oslo an epic achievement or an epic mistake? And if it's dead, as so many Palestinians and Israelis say, where do they go from here? We'll be getting two perspectives on these questions. And we'll start with Yossi Beilin, a former Minister of Justice in Israel and one of the officials who initiated the talks in Oslo. You know, there's a lot of derision of Oslo, and I'm interested in going from where we were to your ongoing efforts today to say, look, there's still a partner, there are still opportunities out there. What would a new Oslo look like, Yossi?
Well, it is not Oslo anymore. Oslo was really, as you said, an interim agreement which was abused by the Israeli right in order to become a permanent one. And here we are. We had to finish it in '99, and here we are now in '23, and we are still in an interim agreement which never ended. I don't think that the Palestinians came to Oslo in order to use terror. I know that we did not come to Oslo in order to build more settlements or to stay in the West Bank and Gaza. Our aim was to end occupation. But today it is a very different situation. One of the reasons for that is that you have about 500,000 settlers in the West Bank, while in the time of Oslo you had about 100,000. And it became the biggest hurdle for a permanent agreement of two-state solution, which I believe is the only one, the only realistic solution. That is why a group of Palestinians led by Dr. Hiba Husseini and a group of Israelis led by me prepared a book about a confederation, a Palestinian-Israeli confederation, a loose confederation in the parameters of the European Union, so that the two states will be totally independent and sovereign, but there will be a kind of an umbrella of a confederation which will allow those Israelis who will find themselves in the Palestinian states with their settlements to stay there as Israeli citizens and Palestinian permanent residents, while the same number of Palestinians will have the right to come to Israel as Palestinian citizens and Israeli residents. And that has nothing to do with the solution for the refugees, which will be symbolic, financial, and the refugees who will come to Israel, the Palestinian refugees who will be allowed to Israel, will become full citizens.
Is there any realistic deal, Yossi, that can be done given the preeminence of the Israeli right in the political sphere in Israel? Or do you sense that there's an opportunity for things to begin shifting back towards the center or left?
The latter. I don't think that the current government in Israel is ready for peace, because peace is the partition of the land. That's the point. And you have on both sides extremists, and regretfully, these extremists are not a small minority, who believe that it is all there. It's a zero sum, and we believe in win-win, and win-win is possible. We know it by now because we had so many, or we had at least some serious attempts to find a permanent solution, either formally or informally, that we know by now what is the solution. The only point is, first of all, as I said before, solving the issue of the settlers, and I believe that we have a solution for that, as I told you. And the other thing is you have to have leaders who are courageous enough and are ready to sacrifice their own lives in order to get peace. We know that people like Sadat, like Rabin and others did it. Of course, I hope that it will never happen again, but this is a risk that they will have to take. If you have such people, then you have peace.
You and I met 20 years ago in Israel, in Tel Aviv, and at that moment, it felt like this crisis, this ongoing ulcer in the world, was strategically important. It was one of the world's hot fault lines. And I kind of feel that with the Abraham Accords, with normalization efforts right now clearly underway between Israel and Saudi Arabia, that this is no longer a barrier or even in the way of potential normalization of the broader Middle East. Are there any opportunities with this crisis becoming less strategically significant than it used to be?
Yes, because it is for us vital to have peace. It is vital for the Palestinians to implement, to fulfill their right for self-determination and to end the occupation. And for us, it is vital to have a border in the eastern side of our state in order to assure that Israel is a Jewish state, which is a democratic state, and also a state for all its citizens. The current situation is very close to a situation of a Jewish minority dominating a non-Jewish or a Palestinian majority, and that is the end of the dream, of the Zionist dream, which did not build on taking the rights of the people who lived here. And that is, and now we can prove it. I mean, in my agreement with Abu Mazen in 95, in the Clinton parameters of 2000, in the Geneva Initiative of 2003, and so on and so forth, that we don't have to take the rights of the other side in order to satisfy our own rights. So there is no real reason why not to do that, and it won't take too much time, hopefully, to negotiate, because we have so much material, including an excess of hundreds of pages about water, about electromagnetic space, about environment, you name it. We can make peace.
Is Joe Biden doing all he can to secure the peace that you've outlined, or is he not even on the field?
Not enough. I mean, I know him very well, and he is really a wonderful person and well-read and knowledgeable about the conflict. And he supports, of course, the two-state solution. And his heart is in the right place. And I hope also now, if he succeeds with the normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and if the Palestinian issue is on the agenda, that he will help us in going towards peace. But I feel that it is not too high of his agenda, because, politicians are firefighters. And if fire is not there, or not high enough, or not significant enough, they have other priorities. I cannot blame him. It is our fire. We have to extinguish it.
And finally, Yossi, when it comes to what you've articulated before by way of confederation and support for a different Franklin, and to be candid, I had not heard about this framing and potential structure of governance before. What's the appetite in Israel for that? What's the appetite on your Palestinian with your Palestinian contacts?
You're right that it did not become in the last year and a half a household definition. We met with the UN Secretary General, Mr. Gutierrez. We met with the American Secretary of State, and with other leaders, foreign ministers especially, and others. In the world, people say, okay, if you Palestinians and Israelis are coming to us and ask our help in order to implement a solution that you have already agreed upon, like with Oslo, we will hug you and kiss you. Speaking about on the Palestinian state, on the Palestinian side, I remember that President Abbas said that he was ready to have a confederation with Israel and Jordan. So I don't think that there will be a real opposition to it. In Israel, I don't believe that it will be very simple, because those who are against a two-state solution or the partition of the land will be also against the confederation, because, as I said, it is based on the partition. But I think that if we really succeed in getting off the table the issue of the settlements, it will make it it will make it easier, not very easy, easier for those leaders or the future prime minister in Israel who is committed to make peace. If it is not high on his or her agenda, then I don't believe that any solution would be a solution. And what are the other solutions? I mean, just to say I am supporting the two-state solution today is not enough. You must tell me, how are you going to do that? And we are suggesting a way towards a two-state solution.
Well, thank you for that. Yossi Beilin, former Israeli justice minister and one of the initiators of the Oslo peace process more than 30 years ago. Thanks so much for your candid views today. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Now we turn to Mustafa Barghouti, who heads the Palestinian National Initiative Party and former presidential candidate in Palestine. Mustafa, it's great to see you and to talk to you. Look, I mean, you heard my conversation with former Minister of Justice in Israel, Yossi Beilin, who was involved with the Oslo Accords. This is 30 years. And I'm trying to figure out where we're going in the future. What are the building blocks to finally move what I sort of see as one of the world's worst humanitarian ulcers towards a much healthier equilibrium? And I'd love to get your insights and reactions.
I think the Oslo Agreement was a trap that was built for the Palestinian leadership of the PLO, and they fell in it. Why I say so? Because Oslo Agreement did not include the most vital element, which we were insisting on with Dr. Haidar Abdeshafi, who was the head of the Washington team, which is that before concluding any agreement, there has to be complete and total stop of all settlement activities. Not only because Israeli settlement activities were illegal, according to international law, but also because settlement building was the main instrument that the Israeli Zionist movement used and continues to use to kill the two-state solution. And actually, that's exactly what happened. Because Oslo Agreement did not include complete and total stop of all settlement activities, the number of illegal settlers have increased from 121,000 in 1993 to more than 750,000 today. That includes, of course, settlers in East Jerusalem. And today, the settlers have become not only a group that is occupying illegally the land, but they have become a decisive force in Israeli politics. They have 14 members in the Israeli Knesset. They are the ones who produced fascism in Israel. And they have ministers like Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, who don't shy away from calling themselves fascist homophobes, and who are saying that there is no place for Palestinian state and that their goal is to fill the West Bank with settlers so that Palestinians would lose any hope of a state of their own. And their solution is that Palestinians either should immigrate or accept a life of subjugation to their system of apartheid or die.
Do you believe that the ultimate goal then of the Israelis is to use peace negotiations, you know, essentially as a way to annex and to kind of fully annex the West Bank?
Absolutely. I think if I look historically at what happened, regardless of maybe some goodwill of some people on the Israeli side, but the reality, they all served one purpose: to diffuse the results of the first Intifada, which has forced Israel to sit down and negotiate with Palestinians, because Israel could not run occupation in the same old way because of Palestinian resistance. And so in addition to diffusing the Intifada, their second goal was to gain time so that they can continue the colonial settlement project of settling Jewish Israelis in the occupied territories. In reality, what happened in the West Bank during the last 30 years and even before is not different from what Israel did in 1948 areas, where they grabbed the Palestinian land, they took it away from their own, from their people, they displaced 70% of the Palestinians. And when Israel was established, Palestinians owned at that time 82% of the land. Today, they own only 3.5% of the land of where Israel is. Today, Israel is continuing the same process in the so-called historic Palestine. So in reality, what we face today is a new reality. It's a new one apartheid state. Practically, that is what we have as a result of the Israeli policies.
In my conversation with Yossi Beilin a minute ago, he talked about a framing I hadn't heard about before, which sort of a confederation-style government, two governments that largely exist under a, under a tent, if you will, and said that he talked to Guterres at the United Nations, talked to Abu Mazen, and a lot of people have given a wink and nod to this possibility and said they could live with that. Can you live with a confederation? What are your views of this confederation proposal?
I totally disagree with Mr. Beilin's proposal, and I will explain to you why. First of all, in my opinion, Oslo Agreement accommodated the settlement expansion. And the framework of what is called confederation is also trying to accommodate the settlements and the settlers who are illegally in the West Bank. It denies and violates international law. And that is exactly the same kind of process that Mr. Beilin was involved in. The interim agreements, gradual agreements, without insisting on stopping the main problem, which is settlements that are killing the two states option. And because of that kind of policy, we ended up losing the whole idea of two-state solution. I think Israel already killed the two-state solution. And speaking about a confederation, while you speak at the same time about Israel as a Jewish state only, is a total violation of every international law. In my opinion, the only solution that can substitute a reality of one apartheid state is a one democratic state, where everybody, Palestinians and Israelis, could enjoy the same rights, where Palestinians will have not only civil rights, but also their national rights, and will have the same right of self-determination. But enslaving Palestinians in the so-called confederation, while settlers remain in the West Bank, and even without allowing Palestinian refugees who were displaced from their homeland in 1948, that by itself is nothing but an effort to accommodate the wrongdoing of the Israeli occupation, to accommodate the settlement expansion, and it is a way of adjusting the situation to what the Israeli governments want. That's also besides the point that what we have now in Israel is a truly fascist government. And the most extreme in the history of this region. And these guys do not accept two states, do not accept one state. All they want is to negate the rights of the Palestinians here. They will not be stopped by another round of negotiations. They will be stopped only by Palestinians insisting on their steadfastness and resistance, and by a true boycott, divestment, sanctions campaign against this system of apartheid.
Mustafa, do the Abraham Accords matter to what you're trying to achieve, or are they irrelevant as you look at the prospects of a potential Saudi-Israeli normalization? Does that undermine Palestinian situation, or is this just all surface noise that really doesn't matter to your efforts?
Well, it's both, to be accurate. From one side, it's a stab in the back of the Palestinians, because the whole idea of normalization that was initiated by Mr. Trump, of course, the design was made or established by Netanyahu himself. The whole idea of normalization is about liquidating the Palestinian issue, marginalizing the Palestinian issue. And that's exactly what Netanyahu says openly. He says the problem is not the Palestinians. We should make peace with Arabs. But all these actions negate the fact that Israel is not in war with Bahrain or with the Emirates. Israel has a problem with Palestinians because it is occupying the land of Palestinians. So, in my opinion, from one side, these agreements, of course, hurt the Palestinian cause because it is used by Israel to marginalize the Palestinian issue. But on the other hand, it doesn't really affect our struggle. All these countries that are normalizing with Israel did not have their armies ready, standing to come and help Palestinians. I mean, we know that for many years, many of them had secret relations with Israel. The most important point that is missed here by Israelis and by the international community is that regardless of the government's normalization, the people of these countries do not normalize. Look, Israel had peace agreements with Egypt since 1978. They have peace agreement with Jordan since 1994. Do they have normalization with the peoples of these countries? Of course not. On the contrary, now Netanyahu speaks about a wall that he built on the Egyptian border and another wall that he wants to build with Jordan.
Right.
So in reality, these normalization activities are not accepted by the peoples of these countries and stay on the surface. And they are normalization with governments, not with countries.
Finally, Mustafa, I'm just interested in how you see the future. Do you see time on your side? Do you see time on the Israeli side? You know, do you see a Palestine that will be free one day?
Absolutely. I'm so optimistic about that. And I know that regardless and we are so disappointed by the behavior of so many governments in the world, especially Western governments, who keep speaking about two-state solution, but do nothing to stop the settlements that is assassinating the two-state solution, who are not even daring to tell Israel, stop the settlements or we will impose sanctions on you. Regardless of all that, I believe that the Palestinian question has never been understood worldwide as it is today. I believe that the Palestinian people, and I mean by that all the Palestinians, whether they live inside Israel or in the occupied territories or in the diaspora, are so unified and united now about the goal of what they want as it is today. I believe that we will get freedom, but frankly speaking, it will not be a freedom within a small little state in ghettos that Israel established by cutting the West Bank into pieces. It will be freedom within one democratic free state. A democratic state, and I say that clearly and openly, is the only solution to the situation that we have today. A democratic state is the only substitute to one apartheid state reality that we have today.
Well, Mustafa Barghouti, head of the Palestinian National Initiative Party, thank you so much for your candor and for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So what's the bottom line? When we look at how nations behave, there are essentially no rules. There's no morality, just anarchy. Realists believe that anarchy has to be bent to rules and norms through the use of hard power. No one understands hard power more than the Israelis and Palestinians. The wars Israel survived against its Arab neighbors took power to emerge from. And so too, eventually, Palestine will need power on its side to establish a different future equilibrium with Israel. The problem for Palestine today, though, is it has moved from being one of the world's fault lines to becoming a strategically less significant moral quagmire. But making the moral case and shaming the nightmare of occupation is just not going to be enough to solve this long-standing occupation. And that, regrettably, is the bottom line.